guys. Now I'm here with Executive Director of the Ashbrook Center and Professor of Political Science, Dr. Jeffrey Sikkenga. Thank you for being here.
Glad to be here with you.
What do you predict the impact of the coronavirus will have on our country during and after this election?
Wow, that's a really big topic. I think clearly it has affected the president's chances for re-election, no doubt about that. If you go back to January, February, and you look at public opinion polls, you know, they really show that the president had a high approval rating, especially on handling of things like the economy. And then COVID hits in March.
Right.
And then the shutdowns, and then, of course, a lot of unemployment and economic distress. And I think that really hurt the president's chances and gave the Democrats an opportunity to run against him and make it, obviously, it's going to be a very close election. I don't think it would have been as close if COVID had happened. So just looking at it from the purely political point of view, the campaign point of view, I think it hurt the Republicans and helped the Democrats.
Okay. What qualities do you believe our country needs in a president at this time?
Yeah, this is one of these really important moments in American history where you see the significance of presidential leadership. But this COVID situation has really also magnified the importance of leadership at the state level. You know, governors, for example, have been really important. Here in Ohio, Governor DeWine has had a huge role in responding to the COVID situation, and that's really been true across the country. So it's partly presidential leadership, but I would also say leadership, executive leadership at the state level, the legislatures, look, the county level in Ashland County, the mayoral level in cities, really executives in times of crisis, you see the importance of excellent executive leadership. Sometimes you don't see that in quiet times, in peaceful times, but in moments like this, you really see the importance of good judgment, of courage, and of the energy and ability to act in a moment of crisis.
Definitely. Could you describe the role of social media in political campaigns?
Whoa, yeah, that's becoming bigger and bigger all the time.
For sure.
You know, people your age, young people, do they even read newspapers anymore?
I like to think so.
But they get so much of their news, of course, from social media. And it's not just young people. You know, one of the fastest growing demographics on Facebook is people who are 65 and older.
Okay.
People like my mom, who never even used Facebook 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Now it's a really important outlet for them, and also a place to get news.
For sure.
So I'd say that social media has risen in importance as far as people acquiring news about what's going on in the country and forming political opinions. It's not just the information you get, it's you see your friends, like if you're on Facebook or Twitter or somewhere else and you're seeing these tweets and these posts, you're seeing other people's opinions. And I think that has a big effect in shaping your own opinions. So it's both information and opinion getting, and social media is really the place where we see that happening.
Definitely. Could you briefly explain Ohio's vote by mail and absentee voting?
Yeah, so especially under the COVID situation, we are going to have in-person voting in Ohio. That's not true actually in all of the states. There are some states out west where all of the voting will be done by mail. So that's not true in Ohio. Of course, it also depends on the COVID situation. If there was a significant outbreak, by election day, that will change things. But no, I think what we'll see is a lot more absentee voting, a lot more, not just absentee voting, but mail-in voting, which is a little bit different. People are voting earlier, so that there's really not election day anymore, it's like election month.
Right, exactly.
And early voting started in lots of states weeks before the election. So we're seeing that happen, and I think that's a trend that's going to happen more and more. Thinking politically about it, the question is, does it hurt or help certain political parties? Does it hurt the Republicans or help them? Hurt the Democrats or help them? I don't think we know yet. I would say the general consensus has been early voting and mail-in voting helps the Democrats in a presidential election. But I'm not so sure that's true, actually, because there's just one example that I'm familiar with. a special election for a congressional seat out in California, in the northern suburbs of Los Angeles, which was actually a seat that the Republicans held, but then the Democrats took it back in 2018, and then in a special election, all mail-in voting during COVID times this past summer, the Republican candidate won.
Oh, wow.
So it's interesting. I think we don't know yet what the effect is going to be.
Right. How will this form of voting impact the 2020 election?
Yeah, like I said, I just don't think we know what it's going to be. We'll see. I think the turnout in Ohio, a lot of people are still going to be, especially older people, will split. Some of them will say, I don't want to go to the polls in person during COVID times. But a lot of them are in the habit, like I'm one of those people, I'm in the habit of going to the poll in person on election day.
Right.
I really actually think it's a really important kind of civic ritual for us as citizens to engage in. You get to see your fellow citizens, you get to meet the volunteers who are actually running the election, your local election. I think it's actually important. I'm not sure if young people think it's that important anymore to do that, but I think we're going to see more of that kind of voting. It typically had been younger people who did that before, but I think because of COVID now, we're going to see a growing number of older people, again, like my own parents, who don't want to go to the polling booth under these conditions, so they send in their vote by mail.
Okay. President Trump is spending less on TV ads and holding more live campaign rallies in Ohio than Vice President Biden. What are the motivations behind these two campaign angles?
Yeah, that's an interesting. They're really different campaigns. This is unusual. We usually see the same basic campaign rule book being followed by both parties. That's been typical for the last 4, 5, 6 elections. It's very unusual. Well, we're going to see which one works. I think it's both a matter of the president's own kind of personal inclination. He gets energy from being around big crowds.
Definitely.
He loves that he loves the stage, obviously. That's a place where he kind of feels more, I think, naturally at home. Vice President Biden, I think it feels more comfortable in situations where that's not the case. So I think it's partly their own personal inclinations. I also think it's kind of a strategic choice by their campaigns, because President Trump's campaign is built on the idea of him as a strong leader who's not afraid of the coronavirus and that situation. Vice President Biden's campaign idea is, I'm stable, I'm secure, I'm safe compared to that guy. And so I think it's a contrast, not only in personalities, but sort of in campaign strategies.
Okay. What key factors should the public be paying attention to tonight in the presidential race?
Well, turnout. Who's turning out to actually vote? You know, public opinion polls will tell you, if you were going to vote, who would you vote for? It doesn't always tell you who's actually going to vote. So I think we need to be looking at exit polls tonight about who's voting, what percentage of people are voting, what are the demographics of the voters? Are they male? Are they female? Are they white, African American? Do they have a bachelor's degree? Do they not have a bachelor's degree? All the things by which we are some measure of predictor of who people vote for. I think that's right. And of course, we're going to have to look very carefully at the key battleground states. You know, as the election has come now to this point, we really only have about 6 or 8 states that will decide the presidential election. So nobody will be surprised about California tonight, right? Nobody will be surprised about Tennessee on the other side. What we're going to be looking at are those 6 or 8 states that President Trump won in 2016 that really surprised people. So states like Pennsylvania, states like Michigan, states like Wisconsin, industrial Midwest, Ohio, Florida, Arizona, states like that, those are the states that probably will decide this presidential election. Okay.
What is one thing you wish all American people knew about politics and or voting?
Politics is a good thing. I know sometimes we don't think that. We sometimes think, oh, politics is just about fighting, bickering, arguing. I think what we forget, it's all about just getting power for yourself or your political party. I think sometimes we forget that there is all this fighting and there is all this bickering because politics is really about what's right for the country. And the Democratic Party has one view of what's right for the country. The Republican Party has a different view of what's right for the country. And that's why they're clashing.
Right.
So that means that they both have a view of what they want America to be and what they think America should be. That's, I think, a great part of politics. We can discuss with each other, we can argue, and then in the end we can vote about whose vision of America we think is the best for our country. So even in the midst of all that bickering, we should not forget that we're really fighting about a kind of noble idea about what America should be. So that's why we argue about it, not just for the sake of arguing.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you for sitting down with me tonight.
So glad to be here. Thank you very much, Lydia.
Thank you. Let's head back to the Election 20 update set.